Well, welcome, Tucker, to the next edition of Tim and Tucker, or Tucker and Tim. Which do you prefer for TNT?
Let's go Tucker first.
Okay. Well, all right. So, welcome to this episode. Last time we were talking, we mentioned that you're preparing for a ultra marathon 100 mile. I want to talk to you a little bit about that, but I don't think we mentioned it. But I know you're also studying for your LSAT test. You're currently in MBA school, but you were studying for your LSAT. How'd you do on that?
Yeah, well, actually, it was a big week for me. Last week, I got my LSAT back, and then, like you said, did 100 miles. So the LSAT went great. Trying to go to law school, got a 179, which is going to help out with that cause. So
179 out of how many?
out of 180, missed one question. Isn't that always how it goes?
Are you going to take it again to try to get that one right?
I guess I left a point on the table. Might as well.
Now, 179 sounds pretty good. So let's talk about the Wildcat 100. What made you want to sign up to do a 100-mile ultra marathon? Tell us what that is and why you decided to do it.
That's that's a great question. That's the first question I always get. Is it's like, why are you doing this? What you must be crazy. Why'd you even want to do this? And I guess it does take a little bit of crazy, a tasteful amount. I guess the reason that you do things like this is, why do you climb the mountain? Because it's there. Really, I signed up because at one point about a year ago, I found out that these existed. I got down this internet hole. I found out that they existed, and then I just couldn't shake it from my head. I knew, there was this great challenge out there, and I always wondered, I spent a couple months wondering how I could stack up. And then, one day I just decided to pull the trigger and really, test my limits and see if I could, take the gut check.
So it wasn't because your daddy didn't love you enough?
No, no, nothing Freudian, nothing psychological.
So tell us about the course. How did the 100-mile course lay out?
Yeah, well, so, that's the fun part is it's 100 miles, but they make you do a loop. So, just, because why not? Need to make it a little bit harder. So I did a 2.5 mile loop. It, was in Pensacola, Florida, in the panhandle of Florida, through the woods. It's 2.5 miles. So, you'd start at the start line, run through the woods, run through the roots and the trees and crap like that, and then turn around when you're, a mile and a quarter, and then make your way back, and you've done 2.5 miles. And I did that 40 times. So I got really familiar with that loop, I guess you could say.
Is there a particular low point that you remember when you, I'm assuming you finished, right? You want to tell us whether you finished or not?
I did finish. I did, in fact, finish. Took me 34 hours, but I did, in fact, cross that finish line. It wasn't pretty, but it got done.
So 34 hours of running and walking, no sleeps, but you did get to stop and rest at each of the 2.5 mile loops, right?
Yeah, no, I didn't, there's no sleep, there's no real breaks or anything like that. You just, you take a breather and then you start the next lap.
So what was the low point? Did you ever think you would not finish?
Yeah, I think the biggest low point is, for me, just personally, I remember the 24-hour mark. I remember once I had been running for 24 hours, I was like, I'm the most tired I've ever been in my entire life. I've ran through an entire night. You think about it, you run all the way from sundown to sun up again. And I was nowhere near the finish line. I still had 10 hours to go. So that was, one of those moments where it's, I've already got 24 hours down in this and I've got a long way to go. It seems pretty hopeless, but you got to just keep moving.
So what was your thought process? Did you count the laps as you're finished? Like, all right, that's lap 20, I'm halfway done. Or did you focus on how much you had to go? I've only got 20 more to go. What was the mental process?
Yeah, actually, it's a great question, because I think a lot of things that people focus with these races is, you think about your legs, you think about what you're eating, and you think about crap like that. But truth be told, that's not the hard part. Anyone's legs can do it. We're designed to be able to do something like that. But the hard part is the mental battle. That's what gets people to quit. And so, you're asking me these questions like, did I count the laps? Did I do stuff like that? really, I think I didn't do any of that. I didn't really have a strategy like that. I wasn't, counting laps. I wasn't watching the clock. I wasn't doing anything like that. I think the way that you get through something like this is you have to make a hard commitment to yourself that quitting is just non-negotiable. That's just no matter what, I won't even let myself consider quitting. That's just not an option. And so when you've, flip that switch and you realize there's nothing that will happen to me that will make me quit, then you don't care about the laps. You don't care about the time or anything like that. You're just moving forward and taking every step at a time.
Well, apparently it was an option for other people because the Wildcat 100, they had like 150 people sign up. They also had 50 miles, 50 Ks. I think there's a 15-mile option as well. There's about 150 some people signed up for that for all of the races. And out of that, as I remember, I think there was 46 that signed up for the 100-mile race, and only 14 finished. Did you encounter some of the ones that didn't finish and know why they didn't finish? Because you said it wasn't an option, but obviously it was an option for them.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of time to talk to people when you're just out there, for 36 hours and there's not much to entertain you. So you definitely do talk to a lot of the other people. And it was really interesting to see other people's mindsets and, how they coped with the struggles that they were going through. Because, obviously everyone's going to struggle. It's really hard to go that far. But I think, I would meet people and I would meet them and talk to them at around mile 30. And, something would happen. And the next time I would see them, there would be some complete paradigm shift. Like, they had stubbed their toe or something like that. And just problems like that, they build up. And by the time I'd see them on like mile 70, they were seconds away from throwing in the towel. And it's, it's really interesting to try to analyze what went wrong and, what thoughts crept into their mind. I know a big thing for a lot of people was when you're on these loop courses, you see the finish line every single time, and it's a great opportunity to quit. So every 2.5 miles you pass by, you're not 50 miles into the woods, you can quit every 2 miles. It's your car's right there. You can drive away. And so I think that is what got a lot of people is, the allure of quitting. It was just ever present. There was just always that option. And you can't, for some people, they couldn't shake that thought after 50 miles or 60 miles or 70 miles or, what have it.
Yeah, well, as you know, but for the audience, your mother and I were there at the just past the finish line. So we saw you 40 times as you came around there. And I think it was somewhere in the late 60s, maybe about 70 miles and 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And you'd been running about 20 hours and you were down, right? You didn't talk about quitting, but you were talking about that how tough it was and it was the only time I saw you that I felt like you were contemplating quitting. And so you sent you off on your next loop. And when you came back, I was giving you some suggestions, like you could lay down and rest a while instead of quitting, quit and take a nap. And when I saw you, you were like, what do you mean? Quitting's not an option. And somewhere on that loop, you had gone from the negative self-talk to back to the quitting wasn't an option. Do you remember that?
I do. I remember that lap great. So, a lot of stuff had been building up. I remember, I'd thrown up on that lap. A lot of stuff had happened. And that was when, my knee had blown out. My left knee had just completely, exploded on me. And so I was at a real low point. And I remember thinking, I was like, they've thrown everything at me here. This is, as much as I could possibly struggle. But I definitely remember starting to get negative. And, like I said, those thoughts, they do creep in. We're all human. There's no one that's going to do 100 miles and never have a moment where they're like, this sucks. You're going to have a moment where there's not a smile on your face and stuff like that. But there's a big difference between, not having a good time and getting to a point where you can't stomach it anymore. So, the trade-off I made for myself is I said, you get this lap. You can be down in the dumps for this lap. And when this lap is up, when it's expired, it's time to, double back down and stop, talking negatively to myself. Cause like I said, that stuff builds up over time. And so I just had to refocus and take a second. And when that lap finished, I said, okay, I'm right back at it. Let's just think about this next lap.
It was amazing to see because, again, I was exhausted because I hadn't had any sleep and I wasn't running and walking. I could tell you were exhausted. And when you left, I thought, I don't know what to do to help you. And by the time you had come back around, right, 2.5 miles later, you had talked yourself back into it, and it wasn't a problem. It wasn't a problem anymore. The other funny time I remember, and I think this was when you just finished mile 95, because it'd been hot, right? It's a panhandle of Florida, it's hot and humid,
Big time, yeah, big time.
hot. But on mile 95, out of nowhere came a big downpour, right? A big rainstorm. And so most of the time that would be debilitating, but you only had 5 miles left. So I don't think that would in any way made you think about quitting at mile 95, did it?
No, not at all. And you know what's funny is there are points in something like that where it just gets so bad that you have to sit back and laugh. I remember looking at mile 95 and I was like, I am almost done. I got an hour or two left maybe. And it started, torrential downpour. And so I remember standing there and just laughing to myself and going, okay, this is the last card that this race has to play. It can't get any worse than this. So that's a little bit freeing that you can sit back and just smile and go, this is as hard as it's going to get. This race has thrown everything it possibly can at me. It's now pouring. I'm going to have to deal with the mud and stuff like that. But the good news is it can't possibly get any worse than this. So if I can make it through this next lap, then I'm home free.
Did you see anything interesting in the woods in the middle of the night when you're out there by yourself?
Oh my gosh, you have no idea. I think, I was getting so tired that I almost didn't really care at that point. But looking back, there were a bunch of snakes. I remember, a snake ran across my feet. There were a ton of spiders. It was like that Harry Potter scene in the woods where they go and there's a ton of spiders. Yeah, those were the woods that I was going through. But again, it was like, whatever, man. Just give me all the snakes you got. I'm just going to keep on walking.
Well, they do say that it's not uncommon to hallucinate on those ultra marathons. You sure they were really spiders and snakes?
I guess maybe one of them had a top hat on and he was doing stand-up comedy. But
so to make this a business point, there was one thing that we talked about. So at the start line, I mentioned to one of the other contestants, I said, well, you've already done the hard part because you've made it to the start line. And he laughed and said, no, the hard part's getting to the finish line. So which do you think is harder, getting to the start line or getting to the finish line?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I definitely understand the argument. It is hard to get to the start line. I mean, you think about the grand scheme of everyone in America that could have done this, and only 40 people signed up. So, statistically, I guess you could say it's hard to get to the start line. But in reality, you got to think about your sample size here. At least for me personally, the starting is a non-factor. Every of those 40 people, starting is the easy part. We don't even think about the starting. That's just something that, those 40 people are going to do. And so I would have to say it's definitely the finishing because, that's where you make your money is you got to put the 100 miles in. Me personally, I don't even factor the starting in. To me would not be an accomplishment. But I think, in the grander perspective, there's an argument to be made that I guess maybe it is, an accomplishment just to start.
Yeah, I think it was 46 officially. Some of those they were able to drop down to the 50K or 50 miles. But of the 46 that signed up, 14 finished. Only 14 out of the 46 finished. So in that sample size, right, you were one of the 14. And right. What'd you come in out of the 14? This was your first 100 out of the 14. What?
Oh gosh, what was it? Eighth? I guess maybe eighth or ninth.
Eighth male. You were ninth finished. A female, a 71-year-old female, finished in front of you. So. Yeah. As much as you want to pat yourself on back, it's possible.
That's badass.
for old people to do it as well too. So she was. You did get to talk to her a little bit, right?
Yeah, I did. I got to talk to her, and honestly, she scared me a little bit. She was so intense. I'd be walking by, and I'd go, "How are you doing?" And she'd just look at me. She'd go, "I wish it was longer." I'm like,
that's a good attitude. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to tie the concept back to the business that we're in, we talked to a lot of partners, people about recruiting partners. They're looking to sign people up to the partner program to get them to get to the start line. And we know how difficult that is to identify, create the right partner profile, go out and recruit and identify the right partners. But what we always say is that's as important as that is, that's not the finish line. Getting partners to the start line, it means nothing, because until they are actually producing for you on a regular basis, generating revenue for you, finding new opportunities for you, working with you on new opportunities, and building a pipeline with you, that's the finish line. And so unless you have an onboarding plan and a strategy to get them from the start line, a 30, 60, 90-day plan, and how to manage that partner life cycle from start to finish in terms of them actually being a productive partner, that's what we can help you with. So we can certainly help you with your recruiting strategy, help you identifying the ideal partner profile, but much more important than that is we'll talk to you about how you get them to actually the finish line, which is making them a productive partner and producing revenue and generating revenue for you. So if you want to check us out at partner-perspectives.com, we have a lot of other products and services. They're our sponsor. And so Tucker, congratulations on being a finisher, finishing the Wildcat 100. Congratulations on doing pretty well on your LSAT, 179 out of 180. What is that what'd you say that was as a percentage of the takers?
Oh gosh, pretty high, I guess, maybe. A couple people outscored me.
Wasn't it 0.001% of the people? I don't know that you need to take it again. One missed question is not too bad. Maybe it was a pencil anomaly. So very proud of you. As always, we're proud of you, son, and glad you're doing okay. Are you able to walk yet? It's been about 2 weeks. Are you able to walk now after the 100?
I would call it more stumbling around. I'm back to moving, thinking about, what's next.
All right, check in us next time for more TNT. Thanks a bunch.
Bye now.